So for those who just be aware that we're recording this session as well. I've got a few pop-up boxes as we just navigate some of the tech on my side. Okay, so we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, seas, and waters across Australia. We honour the wisdom of Aboriginal and Torres Straits Islanders, elders past, present, and embracing future generations. And those be aware who's in Perth at the moment or in Western Australia that we've just entered a new season in the Noongar people. We're in the Barak season, which is a period of hot and dry and easterly winds, and certainly today is living up to that the very start of that season. So that's fantastic. So all right, just let's move on. Okay, so just so everybody's aware, there's the competition law and meeting protocol. So I assume this is everybody has read this. Just be aware of the protocol around that. And if we can just move to the next slide, fantastic. Okay, standard housekeeping. If you can just keep your microphone on mute. There's sometimes a bit of background noise and can be a bit disturbing if there's a little bit of feedback. Look, but we really want to have Q&A. The idea of these sessions is that they're interactive. So either put up your hand, drop a question in the chat, and look, if we can't answer it straight away or you've got any questions post-presentation, please feel free to ask it after I send us an email, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We'll also have a presentation. We'll have the recording of this presentation online as well if you need to drop off at any time during the session. So yeah, the last WA ECF for the year. So welcome again. My name is Martin Matichka, and I'm the Group Manager for WA Operations based in the Perth office. So fairly straightforward agenda today. As you can see on the screen, and just my advance apologies that we got the presentation out late than we intended to under the terms of reference. But anyway, we've got a number of consultation by Matthew, who's going to give us an overview of the minimum eligibility requirements for the flexible capacity product. I'll be providing an operational overview, some of the peak highlights and the trends that we saw this year. Rebecca will be giving us an overview of the reserve capacity process and upcoming RC activities. We've got Lucas. We just recently published our RCM congestion report, so be giving an update on that. And then we'll round off the session, and I'll just give a summary of stakeholder planned and past events. And Nicola Falcon, who's our Executive General Manager, will give an overview of the look ahead. So might as well get straight into it. So I'll pass it over to Matthew, and we're in your capable hands.
Okay, so first thing is sound check.
Yeah, I can hear you nice and clear there, Matthew.
Very good. Second thing is sharing one's presentation. Tell me if you can see that.
That's great. I can see it perfectly.
Okay, brilliant. Good. So that's 50% of the presentation success. That's a good thing. So the next thing is just to present. Welcome. For those that I haven't yet met, my name is Matthew. I'm nominally a specialist in WA Future System Design for the next 4 months. Given Toby Price is on paternity leave, I am acting manager of Future System Design. What I'm here to talk to today is about a consultation that the rules require us to do for the minimum eligibility requirements for flexible capacity. This consultation is currently underway, and I'll go through all the details of that. Click the button. Okay, so just a bit about flexible capacity. And one thing I would say is that I'm not an expert on flexible capacity per se. Any questions on general flexible capacity, please feel free to ask. But what we'll probably have to do is take most of them and revert and possibly do some type of information session later on when the rules basically commence. So the RCM review rules, which were gazetted in 2023, introduced flexible capacity. So it's to incentivize capacity that can start, stop, and ramp quickly. And the key parameter of that is the magnitude, slope, and duration of the 4-hour ramp. So basically what the graph looks like, from the minimum demand to the evening peak, particularly in winter. Flexible capacity facilities must meet minimum eligibility requirements determined by AEMO. And here's the most important bit. The rules, while gazetted, have not yet commenced. That requires the minister to make another gazettal. We believe that will happen soon. But at this stage, the rules are not commenced and we're consulting in advance of the rules. At the bottom is the timeline generally that we expect to occur once the rules have commenced. So based on the procedure for minimum eligibility requirements for flexible capacity, which we're currently, which has just finished consultation, we are required to publish the minimum eligibility requirements at a date specified in the WEM rules, which at the moment, unless AEMO defers the reserve capacity cycle, that date is about 15th of January. And then the window for certification is April to June. And sorry, let me just move something tech. And then in the ISU in June, we publish the flexible reserve capacity requirement. And then in September, we assign flexible capacity credits. All of this, of course, predicated on the rules actually commencing. So the minimum eligibility requirements. So the rules actually specify what the requirements are, and AEMO must really just specify the parameters of those requirements. So the relevant rule, for those of you who can navigate and find the rules that have been gazetted, and we've got a link in this presentation for where those are, if you can't, under 410(1)A, it basically includes minimum ramp up and ramp down rates, maximum allowed standing stable loading levels, and the maximum time allowed between receiving a dispatch instruction when in a particular state and then operating in a particular way. What that particular state and operating a particular way is changes depending on what type of facility it is. And the facility, excluding a DSP, must be a fast start facility, meaning it can change its level of injection and withdrawal from 0 to the minimum stable loading level within 30 minutes and then shut down within 60 minutes. Now, one point on that last one, the coordinator is intending to change those particular rules, which will, at the moment, remove an electric storage resource and an intermittent generator from the requirement to be a fast start facility. That would leave the only requirement to be a fast start facility to be scheduled facilities. Okay, consultation. So as I mentioned, the procedure, which we're also required to produce, was out for consultation at the same time. That finished on the 4th. The consultation for the minimum eligibility requirements themselves is currently underway. It commenced on the 22nd of November and finishes on the 12th of December. So if you are interested in making a submission, have another 10 days. In the slide pack here, I've got a link for where the consultation paper is, but it's pretty easy to find.
Matthew, sorry,
yes.
Can you confirm, was that the 12th of December or the 20th, which
20th.
is on the slide? Thanks.
Sorry, did I say 12th?
Yes.
My apologies. My apologies. 20th of December. Good. Thank you for correcting me. Okay, 20th of December. So got 10 days. And as I said, the procedure has just closed, which we're just working through the procedure change process for finalising. The contents of the procedure, which relate to consulting and publishing. Now, this is relevant to the consultation process that we're actually going through for the minimum eligibility requirements at the moment. So the procedure which we went through the process for basically sets out the parameters of what the consultation and the publication will be. The rules basically just say AEMO must consult and AEMO must publish. So the procedure then sets out how AEMO must consult and when AEMO must publish. So in effect, at a high level, we've required that the consultation date must be not less than 15 business days. We must specify a whole heap of stuff. and we must publish at the date required by the rules, which at the present is 15th of January for this cycle will be 2025. But that rule in particular is one that AEMO may change if AEMO defers the reserve capacity cycle. So it's all tied to this flexible date. In general, we publish the minimum eligibility requirements on that date, and we are required to publish and go through the consultation process if we are intending to change the minimum eligibility requirements from the previous year. So if there's intended to be a change, the entire consultation process and publication process exists. If there isn't intended to be a change and we're just rolling from one year to another, all we're going to do is publish. Okay, and so this I just want to spend a little bit of time on. So this is my last slide, and this basically shows the minimum eligibility requirements that we are proposing. So there are 4 types of facilities that can provide minimum eligibility requirements. So non-intermittent generating system, intermittent generating system, battery, and demand side program. And each of those have different characteristics, either required by the rules or as an outcome of other rules that are required. So one of the main rules that require us to do this is we need to take into account the benchmark technology used for the BRCP, and we also need to minimize the costs, which when you work it through, as I've explained in the consultation paper, basically gets to the point of making the minimum eligibility requirements as broad as possible. And when we went through trying to work out what is the best way of approaching this, we started from the assumption, and this is fully set out in the consultation paper, we started from the assumption that we're currently meeting the requirements for flexible capacity. So if you look at this year, for example, we don't have ramping issues. What that means is that the current fleet is sufficient to meet the requirements for flexible capacity. Now, if we roll those assumptions forward, what that means is we can use the parameters of the current fleet to indicate what the minimum eligibility requirement should be for the 2025 cycle. And this is where we get to these numbers. What I should say is, as I indicated before, the bottom row for fast start facility, the coordinator intends to change those rules. So the only one it applies for is non-intermittent generating system. And what else should I say here? The top 3 rows being the maximum allowed minimum stable loading level and the minimum ramp rates all basically come out based on what the current fleet does. And then the minimum time in minutes, so I'll just spend a couple of minutes there. So going from the left to the right, so the requirement is that a non-intermittent generating system must be a fast start facility. And for a fast start facility, the minimum requirement from being cold to meeting the minimum stable loading level is actually 30 minutes. So therefore, the requirement for the minimum eligibility requirements must also be 30 minutes. If I skip to the right-hand side, the requirements for demand-side programs between being dispatched and responding to that dispatch instruction, the rules hard code that at 5 minutes. And so therefore, when we look at intermittent generating systems, the requirement for intermittent generating systems is from being fully curtailed to the minimum stable loading level. But under the current fleet, the minimum stable loading level of intermittent generating systems is actually 0, which means that the time to get from 0 to 0 should really be 0. But given the possibility that someone in the future will come up with an intermittent generating system that does not have a 0 minimum stable loading level, then what we've done for consistency is use the 5 minutes for consistency with demand side programs. Okay, now that is in effect my presentation. That is a rip through at a really high level. The consultation paper, as I said, is out until the 20th. I'm going to make sure I say the 20th correctly. And if anyone has any questions now, please do answer them. I see Noel's got his hand up. Noel.
Thanks, Matthew, for that. Where does the 5 minutes for demand side come from? I thought that they would have 2 hours notice. So I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, so the rules themselves, 410(1)(a) specify that the minimum time between a demand side program responding to a dispatch instruction for flexible capacity. So this has to be a demand side program that is actually certified for flexible capacity. So the minimum time between receiving a dispatch instruction and responding to that dispatch instruction is hard-coded in the rules at 5 minutes. Does that make sense?
So the 2 hour normal notice period for demand side programs is not applicable here?
Let's see. I would have to go back and try and work out how that fits in. It may be a artifact of the flexible capacity itself, but let me just check one other thing. Sorry.
I mean, it would seem that 30 minutes, because you allow generators 30 minutes, that 30 minutes would be reasonable. If you think of a university campus with a chilled water storage system for their air conditioning, it might take them more than 5 minutes to switch over from charging that chilled water tank in the middle of the day to discharging it to reduce their air conditioning load. So that's just an example.
So if I look at the proposed rules, it's the maximum. So for a demand side program, it's the maximum time in minutes allowed between receiving a dispatch instruction and beginning to change output, which must be no more than 5 minutes. So Noel, I don't disagree with you, but I am saying that's what's hard-coded in the rules.
Yeah, okay, so beginning to act is, the critical thing then. Yep. Not necessarily delivering the full reduction.
Not necessarily delivering, yes. So in effect, it's just receive dispatch instruction and start doing something.
Yeah, okay. Maybe this needs a little bit more consideration for those that need more than 5 minutes to start doing things. Thank you.
Next up is Mark.
Thanks, Matthew. Just following on from Noel's comment, because I can't remember this bit in particular, but is it expected that there's a 2-hour notification that you're going to receive an instruction, then you get the instruction, and then have this time limit kicks in?
I believe that is correct. I'd have to get back to you, but as far as I'm aware, the requirements for AEMO to issue dispatch instructions have not changed. So therefore, as the requirement is to give notification in particular ways, and for demand side programs, I believe that's 2 hours, then it would be 2 hour notice of about to give a dispatch instruction, then 5 minutes for the dispatch, for the demand side program to start doing something about that.
Yeah. So the 2 hours makes sense because there's a lot of things to prepare, but I agree with Noel. It's getting consumer assets to move. You might get them just starting to move in 5 minutes, depending on what they are, of course. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions?
You've got one more question in the chat there, Matthew. So it's, what is the method of assessing baseline for a DSP in flexible capacity?
Okay, that is an excellent question, one I'm not capable of answering. I have to get back to you on that one, I'm afraid. Look, what I should say in general is this is a new reserve capacity product. We've never had a new reserve capacity product before. So there's going to be lots of questions on how do we certify this? What does it mean? How are we going to operate? All that type of stuff. And as soon as the rules commence, I think we'll have to do another session on just flexible capacity and here's how it relates to you. So while I will get the answer and revert to the question in the chat, there will be more time and more information coming. Any other questions?
No, I think that's it. I mean, yeah, Mark made a very good point about if we can just track these questions as we're going through this process related to the Flex products. I think that's a pretty good idea. So yeah, we'll take that on board. And Nitika has also dropped in the timetable as well for the 2025 RC timetable. So that's great. Okay, last
very
call.
much, everyone.
No, okay, no worries. Thank you very much, Matthew. Okay, so I'll move on. Just try to get control. Okay, so hopefully people can see the presentation. See my okay, fantastic. Okay, so yeah, this is my section. I'm just going to give a quick overview of where we got over this year. It's been a really quite amazing year of records, to say the least. So there's been a lot of continuing trend associated particularly with rooftop PV, and that's been driving a lot of change as well. We've also had a lot more renewable coming into the system. So a number of records this year. So we had a maximum penetration of 85.1% on just recently, actually only in November. So that was pretty remarkable, with a very large contribution from distributed photovoltaics, which is basically rooftop PV. We've also had over 1,000 megawatts of contribution from wind generation as well in July. So that was another big record. So really interesting progression as we're getting change of the energy mix. Battery injection, obviously we had a number of batteries join the market as well. So we had a maximum injection of 300 megawatts as well in October. We're getting quite increasingly large differentials between minimum and maximum demand. So those who remember, it was only so long ago we had a peak demand of 4,228 megawatts, and it looks like that's the certainly new benchmark going forward with some high forecasts going into the market. This would probably be a record that won't take long to break again. And in November we also had some minimum demand records as well. So really very interesting in that regard. The energy price, this is the distribution over the year. So really very interesting as well. So classic candlewood type of graph indicates that the bulk of the prices do seem to hover in that midsection, with a large proportion on the downside, though we have had a number of quite high outlying events quite regularly hitting the cap as well. So yeah, interesting price distribution this year, and looks like we're going to get that variability in prices. I would imagine it's going to be a feature of the market going forward as well. The fuel mix is continuing to change. So here's basically a graph over the last year. And you can see the proportion of rooftop PV is becoming a greater aspect. So one thing you probably have noticed over the years is that we're trying to call out rooftop PV or distributed PV more often because of the large contribution it's having in our power system. So you can see how the mix is changing. You also can see the amount of wind contribution as well. Reasonably static in megawatt points of view, but quite a significant contribution to generation as well. The total contribution, once again, continually trends over the years. So since 2019, the instantaneous amount has increased from low 60s to mid 80s, and that's really quite amazing. And the actual average contribution has also been going up quite a lot as well when you include rooftop PV. Really amazingly is how much we're actually getting in the system. It doesn't feel like it was that long ago since we actually clicked over 2,000 megawatts from rooftop PV, and now we're looking at 2,200 and some intervals as well. So a very major aspect of our market now. Now, one of the big changes in our system has been the contribution of batteries. So it's been a bit of embedding and working out, or actually watching how they actually interact with the market. But this is a really nice graph, and it sort of shows that from a usage point of view, they're working as effectively as expected. So we can see that, say, discharge is that we're getting a discharge more often than not in the peak morning periods and definitely in the evening periods as well. And then there's on average a larger amount of charging happening in the middle of the day when there's quite a lot of rooftop PV where the energy prices are actually quite low. So look, it's really good to see the operation of those facilities sort of matching what we need from a systems point of view. When we look at the use of batteries in relation to minimum demand thresholds, the 16th of November is a day that we've just chosen. Now, we do see this happening quite regularly now, but there's a few lines on this graph, but I'll just call out the most important thing. So the big blob in the middle, contribution from rooftop PV, that's inferred from different measurements that we have across the power system. So that's where we believe the underlying demand curve ends up being. The graph here is, that's what we call the unscheduled operational demand. And then the black line is basically our operational demand after people start interacting with the market. Now, what we can see through the bottom part of the graph is what's happening with batteries. So as we're getting lower and lower in this particular day, and we're approaching what we call our minimum demand threshold, you can see as it ticks up here where batteries go, okay, well, the prices are quite low, we'll start charging. And you can see that quite effect in the demand, and that's effectively because we've got quite a small market and that batteries are quite big contribution. You can see them almost putting a floor on the operational demand profile. Then they stop responding to prices here in terms of withdrawing or charging, and then they start injecting over the evening peak, and you can see that hump here. So look, it's sort of it's pleasing to see as from an operator point of view because there's a lot of confidence in actually how we handle some of those low demand periods. So plenty of data on our website and information about that one, but that's a really good day if people want to go away and actually use it as a case study. Okay, market costs. Now this is we did get the variability, but this is what we have is the total estimated cost, because there is actually like bilateral contracts in the market, which we're not across some of the prices associated with them. So they're projected, and it's a stack. So you can see the proportion of energy and capacity and FCAS prices as well. Those are aware in the market, there was a price cap that was introduced in May. And then we have the changes recommence or actually commenced in November. So you can actually have a look at the price shift in that aspect as well. So yeah, I mean, that's an interesting graph over the year. It gives you the idea of the total energy cost per megawatt hour. Yeah, so that's a base summary. I just have a look. I think there's one question here. Do these records reflect the recent corrections in PV forecasts from October? Great question, Brad. No, they don't. Now we have picked up that that difference in contribution rooftop PV. We're not planning on going back and retrospectively applying that across the data set, because it could actually end up being confusing when we start looking at historical reports. So we're going to basically have to use that as the benchmark going forward. There would be an ability to for people to actually access data and do that analysis themselves if they wish. All right, I've got another question here. Is do you have insights on ESS costs post November 20? Oh, so the okay. I don't have them in hand. I think there was a bit of information that might have been covered in our last riff, but what I can do is I'll go away after this meeting and I'll follow that one up for you. I think that's a query from Jeff. All right, I'm just scanning the questions in hand. I don't see anything else up at the moment. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so excellent. So just moving on to the next part of the presentation. So I'll hand it over to Rebecca now.
Thanks for that, Martin. Just getting the slides up, and if somebody could just indicate if they can hear me speaking, that would be great as well.
Yep, I can definitely hear you there. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Well, thanks for the opportunity to come along today. As a lot of you would know, 2024 was a really big year in the reserve capacity mechanism. We had a lot going on in terms of certification, and this is a bit of a chance to sit back and give everyone a bit of a summary on some of the highlights we had this year, and also some idea of the upcoming RC activities, which is one of the updates we often do in this section of the WAECF. So we went into this year's 2024 cycle with an RCR from the ESA of 5,696 megawatts. And the CRC we assigned ended up being 6,228 megawatts. So that was quite a bit over what we were initially anticipating. It was really nice to come into the cycle with all that information about these new projects coming on and see the energy transition really starting to kick into gear in WA. Of the CRC that we assigned, because we had that level that was above the RCR, it turned out we got 6,118 megawatts into the NAQ model. As most of you would be aware, there is prioritisations with the NAQ model, and because we've reached the RCR by the first part of the prioritisation, some of the later steps meant that we didn't add things in like people who'd selected fixed price for their facilities, and also facilities that were in proposed status rather than committed. As we all know, we're operating in a constrained network as well. So the NAQ reductions also factored in, and those were especially seen in some of the large projects. Had a few questions come through about those. So it turned out to be 165 megawatts. After this, Lucas is actually going to give a bit of a presentation on the RCM congestion. And if you do have some questions about that number for the NAQ reduction, there's actually some really good publications, including the congestion report, that give a bit more insight into exactly what's going on there. And then the final result is we came out with 5,952 megawatts of capacity credits assigned for last cycle, which was obviously a bit of a surplus over the RCR, and that was a really good result for us because the year before, as I think a lot of people know, we had quite a significant deficit. So it's nice to see that there are projects and a lot of interest in investing in the WEM. One of the really interesting things for us about what the results of last cycle were that we are starting to see a real mix in the technology change. We've got obviously the NIGs, the thermal generation, still really the backbone of the system. And the amount of NIGs in the system is pretty similar year on year. We have excitingly got a little bit more of that peaking gas that you've been hearing a lot about the need for. We had some more of that come through. But the really big change that we saw was the ESRs coming in, the proportion of batteries that we've seen come in this cycle for the capacity year 26-27 was really significant, and that's what's going to start changing the mix, and that obviously is really exciting for our peak capacity, but as Martin mentioned, it's also got some implications for our ops guys as well. Seeing some some EGs coming through, some more about intermittent generation. And we're also starting to see some of the aggregated DSPs, those responses that aren't single loads, but are more of the consumer and smaller loads that are managing to aggregate and come into the system. And that's also really useful for those really warm days when we're looking to get that kind of responsiveness. Scheduled facilities still make up the vast majority of our mix as well, which is important in terms of controllability. So these graphs give you an idea, as I said, diving a little bit further into some of the capacity that we assigned last year. The big batteries did form a really significant part of that new capacity that we've seen through, but they're not the only part of it. While we've got the Synergy Collie batteries and some of the other batteries coming through, also got some new players coming into the market, which is nice to see as well, get some more diversity in there, obviously. And then we've got some other types of facilities, like we're mentioning. It's not just the batteries, but we've also got some other facilities coming in, like peaking gas, and it's really nice to see some of those coming through too, because those are going to be really important over the next few years to manage that transition. While the batteries are obviously a really important part of the capacity, this is a really It's a balance as well, because while the batteries are relieving some of the concerns about capacity, obviously it introduces new challenges for our guys in ops and systems engineering about managing inertia, duration, and network capacity in those constrained locations. And they're probably going to be some of the things that we see coming through into the next year as well. So in terms of, that was last year's cycle, and we've come to the end of that. We've published all of our results now, and you can find them. They now all push pretty much automatically onto the market data site, and more that's going to be where you find all the information associated with the CRC process. But obviously, as always, please feel free to get in contact with us if you guys have got any specific questions about those results. You'd like to dive into things in a little bit more detail specific to your facility. As Netica's put in the chat, in terms of the activities that we're looking forward to now that we've done all our publications and are contemplating the year ahead, for 2025, we've got a slight deferral on the ROI date. We've moved that out from the 15th to 31st of January, and that's largely around the uncertainty in the gazettal timing of the final amending rules. As Matthew was mentioning in the flexible section, we've got some big changes coming down for us in the next year, and those are going to really impact some of the processes for the RCM. So we've just given ourselves a little bit more time there, and hopefully we'll get those final amending rules and be able to give some more information on any changes that could occur to our processes as a result. The other thing that's coming out that's worth keeping an eye on is the market training. Market training is always really popular. We've got the sessions open for both the WEM overview and the RCM sessions. We've got 4 of them, 2 in person, 2 online. Please sign up for them early. As Nick Nelson always used to say, they do sell out faster than Taylor Swift tickets. So we've already got people signing up for the year, and if you'd like to get in, please take the opportunity to do it now. And finally, we've also got the summer testing for our RC testing underway. Our DSPs have just done their verification tests, and all the other facilities who are subject to RC testing are currently in their verification by observation period. We encourage everyone to complete their self-tests by the 31st of December because it allows sufficient time for the metered data to come through and be assessed by the official end of the verification period on the 31st of January. Anyone who hasn't passed by observation by that point is subject to a formal RC test. But obviously it's easier for everyone involved, including the participants, if you can get those done ahead of time. Does anyone have any questions about our section? All right, I will pass over. Lucas, are you there?
I am. Hello, hello. Let me just share my screen. Can I get a confirmation that everything's visible?
I can hear
You
you.
can definitely see. All yours.
Fantastic. So I am, hi, I'm Lucas from the WA System Engineering team, principal engineer, do a lot of work with constraint equations and congestion and that kind of stuff. And this year I'm fairly excited to draw attention to the fact that we published an RCM congestion report. This isn't something that's mentioned in any rule or procedure. It's entirely self-directed. We as a team, us and the reserve capacity team, receive lots of questions about why particular facilities may receive reductions, or particularly the NAC reductions. It's quite a relatively complex beast for good reason as to how those NAC reductions are calculated. And this report is just intended to increase awareness in the market of how those kinds of things are calculated. Obviously, we run other training throughout the year. We've done various presentations on this kind of thing, but the report should help a lot. It's got some new information in there. So yeah, the biggest questions that kind of drive this report from various participants: why is this particular facility impacted by network congestion, and perhaps why not this other one? And also, what is the impact of this specific RCM constraint equation, particularly if a consultant's looking at this type of data, trying to figure out what might happen if a new facility was added to these same constraint equations. So we kind of, by using all the information that's available and some new information that's only just been published this year as part of this report, you can kind of make some inferences. I will have to draw attention to the disclaimer at the front of this report that linear solvers are quite complex, and there's thousands of constraints that are being solved at the same time. So it's it's an all care likelihood type thing, not a guarantee one-for-one type thing. So this is one of the most valuable new bits of information that's published. It's a table that presents which constraints bind in each step of the calculation and in what percentage of scenarios, facility dispatch scenarios, they bind. And if you are aware of some of the rules that surround the NAC calculation, NACs are based on what a facility can do in 95% of facility dispatch scenarios. So if a constraint equation binds by more than 5%, sometimes a little bit lower if they work together, then that constraint equation has likely had some impact on the NAC in some way. So this at least tells you which constraint equations are relevant. The data is also available in a raw spreadsheet format on the reserve capacity website as well. For those of you who might not be familiar, this long list of acronyms here is a description of what the constraint equation is for, and in the report it's quite detailed, especially for these three constraint equations that have been identified to have had some impact. But the short answer is the curly brackets are the thing that can go wrong, and the square brackets are the thing that can get damaged if the first thing goes wrong. And all those little acronyms refer to parts of the network, which you can refer to the report for more detail on. But the short answer is this tells us which constraint equations are relevant, and also importantly at what stage of the NAC calculation they become relevant. And you work that in if you review that in coordination with some of the other bits of data like this, then we can make an assessment about why some things have happened. This table is a table of reduction compared to the maximum possible NAC or CRC that was available in each of these steps. So in this particular run of the NAC model, the only facility that received a reduction in the first step was Olinta Pinjarra. And if you go back to the previous table, the only equation that was binding more than 5% of the time was this equation, which means it's reasonable to infer that this particular equation is the cause of the entirety of this impact to this facility. And that's the kind of thing that's included in the report. We also include a similar but different table about the change in NAC compared to the previous year. So this clarifies that just because facilities are getting reductions doesn't mean that they're worse off than the previous year, because many facilities, particularly in step 3B and 3C, they're being calculated with something higher than the previous year on purpose. So for example, these three facilities here, step 3B is at a high level, without going into the details of the rules, at a high level, is all about facilities that used to have capacity regaining their capacity first in preference to other facilities getting new capacity. So these three facilities in 2022 cycle had a certain level of capacity, then it went down in the 2023 cycle, and they've gone up a little bit as part of the 2024 cycle. Step 3C is similar, but it's any existing facility that has a increase to their capacity, then that's where that capacity gets added before we start considering before we start considering upgrades and new facilities. So these three facilities here are Cole, Wagerup and Olinta Wagerup, other facilities that got new extra capacity in step 3C. Although if you look at the previous table, it's still not as much as they could have got. So there's still constraint equations that are binding and reducing the maximum output those facilities could get. So the point of the report is to draw attention to these three sources of data and to give an example of how you can combine them together to draw insights about which constraint equations are important, ergo which network elements are the restricting ones in our market, and which facilities are impacted by those constraints. So in this particular case, here is a list of the first constraint equation that we're talking about, the one here that's binding in every case. Reformatting data that is available already elsewhere on the AEMO website, but these are the coefficients of the facilities that are relevant to that facility, to that constraint equation, and a list of things that you can infer from combining that data together. There's also a couple of extra useful studies that we did, we took the most relevant constraint equation, took it out of the model and reran it just to see what would happen. The answer to that question in the report, of course, is that there's very little reduction to anybody. So that one constraint is responsible for the majority of that 160 odd reduction that Rebecca drew attention to. And there's another counterfactual study in the report about the impact of NCES contracts having enhanced priority in accordance with the rules, and the what would happen if that wasn't necessarily the case. All that's there in the reports available from the congestion information resource. For those of you who might not be familiar, you can get to it on AEMO's website by following these links. There's also a direct link here in the presentation. Any questions before I hand over?
You have one question in the chat there, Lucas. I'm not sure if you can see it. Otherwise, I can read it out for you.
I can't see because I'm in presenting mode.
Okay, yeah, no problems. So I think, Liz, I think you asked the question. Do you want to come off? You want to ask it, or will I read it out?
Yes, thank you, Lucas. That was really helpful. I noticed that there's been a couple of announcements around the Kemerton SIA, and I can only assume, based on the Frontier experience in the last reserve capacity cycle, that these issues will not go away for the Kemerton SIA generation that's being proposed. Are you going to do some sort of preemptive analysis to sort of inform Western Power and the market as to exactly what sort of capacity or constraint alleviation needs to be undertaken before we start to see more generation being proposed for that sort of strip, sort of, you know, between Waroona and Bunbury?
Yeah, look, I think it's an excellent question, and obviously, if I had my way, I had a team of 100 engineers, and I'd study every possible permutation of every facility, because it's valuable information, right?
And I'm not asking you to replicate all of the constraint work that's done on the East Coast, and I understand the limitations, but I do think it might be really valuable under the circumstances, because these are the signals that people need to know about. And in particular, let's say Roger Cook needs to know about before he goes around announcing special industrial areas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
look, I think the short answer is the entirety of the NAC is assessing, like, it's mostly factual. It's based on things that aren't on or off. You have a set of facilities that are there, and it's based on the past. These future type studies, there are whole other swaths of rules associated with them, like the transmission system plan or the whole system plan and things like that.
That is interesting, because the transmission system plan hasn't been published. So Western Power is currently not in compliance with the rules. So there's not actually been anything published this year as they're required to. So actually there's a vacuum of information. So hence I'm asking you these questions, because you're the only person who's actually had the guts to step up and fill it. So don't get me wrong, you're awesome for doing it, but it does raise a whole bunch of questions in the absence of other data.
Yeah, look, I obviously would take it on board. It is an issue of what rules are there and what's recoverable and what we can commit to. So we'll discuss it with the team, but I certainly can't commit to anything now.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for answering.
All right, we have we've got a question from Erin as well. Erin, do you want to just come off?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you fine. Yep. Go for it.
Oh, excellent. So thanks, Lucas. That was great. One thing that we're struggling with at the moment, we're helping a couple of clients sort of work out what future NAC results might look like. And at the moment, we've built a model, but what we're trying to do is look at what the coefficients at nearby substations are to work out what the likely NAC outcomes are. At the moment, all we can really do is sort of pick a facility that's kind of close and use their coefficients. Is there, like, do you guys produce coefficients at each substation that you could provide, I guess, to the public or something like that to sort of fill that void as well?
But I think the rule intent here is for, you know, the Western Power make available a model of the network. We're also working to see if we can publish that on AEMO's website as part of the limit advice. But Western Power certainly make available a power factor model of the system. And I would think that it's the WEM procedure is quite clear in how a sensitivity factor is calculated for a particular substation. It's not a large amount of work to do that. I'm not against in future working towards publishing coefficients for every substation. In fact, we're already internally working on something like that because of the new rules that are coming about in a couple of years' time about publishing a list of locations that aggregated DSPs can't locate at, and that kind of requires us to do the same sort of analysis. But right now, it is just an extra chunk of work that I think is quite plausible for a consultant to do.
Yeah, and I guess that's sort of the one thing is, do we invest to go and do that? But it's to try and help, people get their projects more bankable. And I guess the other part to it is then having a look at what constraint equations would apply. And particularly, when you've got Western Power, and I can see Mark McKinnon's on the call as well, but something that that could be considered is maybe looking at what the impact of some of the major transmission projects like the Clean Energy Link North, what that would do to some of those constraint equations too. So
yeah, absolutely, and particularly when it comes to forward-looking constraint equations, I guess that is the domain of a consultant that has a model, and they can either have a model that has those future projects in it, which AEMO may or may not have, and also make guesses about projects that might be kind of announced and might not be data for. Like a consultant would be able to modify that model and then make constraint equations that reflect that system state. Obviously, as you've already alluded to, using the constraints from the previous year does give some information, but there's always the risk that all kinds of things might change in terms of the network or the load, and obviously other facilities and their behaviour.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Right, I think that's the last of the questions I can see in the chat. Anybody else want to put their hand up or ask any more questions? Otherwise, we can move on to the next bit. But yeah, thanks very much, Lucas. It's really important to get that information out. I know I've been queried a few times about the importance of that report. So thanks for providing the overview. Okay, so sorry, somebody else jumped in. Okay, that's cool. All right, so just a bit of an outline. Unfortunately, Aidan is unavailable at the moment, so he asked me just to present this slide on behalf of the stakeholder group. So like this year, a lot of training. We actually 650 people went through our WEM training courses this year, and as mentioned prior in the presentation, they are pretty popular. So just log on, and you've got the links there, and get it in early. If we get a lot of demand, what we'll do is we'll increase some of the capacity for certainly the online presentations, but just reduces our ability to sometimes do that one-to-one interaction in those forums if there's a lot of people online. A lot of forums are conducted this year. There's a list of the ones that we're typically doing, which is this one, WAGCF, the DR market participant forums. I know they're very heavily attended. A number of industry testing forums, reserve capacity information sessions, and NAQ information sessions as well. So look, we'll continue doing those. They're well attended, and we've been getting good feedback on those ones. A number of working groups as well that we've been running, and a lot of procedure and consultations too. And yes, that's correct, Dora. I should have actually put up the RIF. The RIF is quite something that my folk really enjoy doing, and there's a very high interaction between market participants from a technical level. So thanks for the reminder. Webinars as well are available, and we also had the 1 year celebration this year as well. We're always looking at a way to make these forums more useful, more productive, and use of market participants' time. So look, if you have any suggestions of topics you want to cover, other forums you'd like to have us to run or stop doing or change, look, very much please reach out to us and we'll factor that into our forward plan. So yeah, so thank you very much for that. Not sure, I can't see any questions or feedback on that. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to Nicola. I hope she's online and she can give us an overview of what's in store for us in 2025.
Thanks, Martin. I am online, but I don't know if you can hear me. I
can. I was a bit nervous that you might have been swept up in some other issues. So
yeah, no, that's
we
fine.
can see you
and
hear you fine.
Off mic, and it did some funny thing on Teams. But anyway, all good now. So for those of you I haven't had a chance and pleasure of meeting, I'm, as Martin suggested, Nicola Falcon. I'm the interim EGM for the WA department. And look, while I only came on board recently, it's clear 2024 was a big year in the WEM. And to be honest, 2025 is set to be at least as big, if not more so. Building on our 4 key strategic priorities of operating today's system to markets, navigating the energy future, engaging our stakeholders and evolving the way we work, here's just a taste of what the new year has in store for us. In 2025, we want to progress the Swiss engineering roadmap and advance some of our operational tools. We'll embark on a substantial body of work and building on the report that we published in August this year to really start focusing on some priority actions under the Swiss engineering roadmap. And really that is focusing on making sure that we get ahead of any potential operational risks and make sure that we are equipped in the control rooms to be able to manage those risks as the energy system transitions. Things include managing system security risks, particularly with more advanced inverter technologies being able to be used, redesigning the system restart processes for a high renewables power system, promoting delivery of new transmission infrastructure. We've heard a little bit about that already today, how critical that's going to be for accommodating new developments into the future. Establishing a coordinated approach to resilience planning, managing outages. If we're going to build all this new transmission and generation, we're going to need to be able to make sure we've got opportunities to manage those outages as we get through to construction. We've got to evolve our operational tools as well and make sure that we've got our control room staff able to test some of these new system conditions in simulation environments rather than just in real time. And we've had a number of record minimum demands this year and we've been absolutely fortunate that we've got fantastic capabilities in the control room to learn how to manage that. But if we could capture those conditions and allow simulation of them ahead of time, we can maximise our ability to train all our control room staff to manage these types of situations. So really want to be able to invest in supporting our control room and promoting visibility and participation of DER as it becomes a growing generation source. How do we really tap into that and make sure that we're not putting additional cost into the system unnecessarily, but really unpacking the inherent value that DER provides? So there's some of the things we're looking at from the Swiss engineering roadmap and developing those operational tools. But we're also seeing that we need to get upstream of that a little bit and try and understand more what the power system security and reliability risks are that are emerging in the next 3, 4, 5, 6 year time frame to make sure those risks can be mitigated through the right investment in the right types of technologies now and not left to last minute interventions and costly modifications or constraints that we might need to otherwise impose in real time. So we're wanting to understand and be more transparent to the market around the types of risks that we see coming up, both from a reliability and a system security perspective. Our goal is to publish in this next electricity statement of opportunity season in June, not just the normal information that we would provide around reliability, but also where we're seeing there is a need for system strength in the future, and hoping that that sort of information is useful for developers, investors looking at what type of technologies are best placed where within the Swiss. So quite excited about providing more information around those sorts of things. And we're also working really, really closely with Western Power. Obviously, this is something we can't do on our own, a strong joint planning with Western Power and with EPWA in looking at that future and how we mitigate it from an operational perspective is really, really important. But at the end of the day, if we can't operate the system reliably and securely, that's our core job and something that we need to make sure that we've got the tools to do. So hence why we're very, very keen to be more forthright about identifying what those gaps are and what we need. The Don Gas inquiry flagged recommendations, of which many we've been able to incorporate in this year's GSU that will be published shortly. But one in particular being a sort of a 20-year outlook is something that we need to work up our information and skills and capability to do. But we're really looking forward to being able to give a longer view of what the gas system is going to be requiring, and particularly since we're seeing that there's going to be more and more coupling between the gas system and the electricity system as we need more gas-fired generation to help firm renewables, particularly when the wind isn't blowing, the sun's not shining, and the battery might not have the full duration of storage required to cover those periods. So getting more insight around the longer-term gas outlook and how that ties in and impacts on the electricity and vice versa is going to be really critical, important, and something we're looking forward already to turning our minds to for 2025. There's also a lot going on, as you will all be aware, around the WEM reform implementation program, some of which we've already heard some of the consultation on procedures today, but just to name a few things, introducing capacity credit allocation capabilities for that flexible capacity is going to be really important, and also to support daily bilateral trading at a facility or a component level. Implementation of systems required to give effect to the WEM investment certainty rule changes and applying a 10-year fixed price. Again, things that we see as really critical to get onto in a timely manner to make sure that the investment signals are right for the right types of technologies going forward to manage reliable and secure supply. Really turning our minds now to enhancing market surveillance data catalogue and really supporting both the ERA and EPWA in the market monitoring. There's the wealth of information and data now, but with a year of the WEM now past, we've gained a lot of experience about how that can be improved and really putting some focus into that as well. Revising contingency reserve lower procurement and recovery to incentivise efficient participation. Planning and commencing implementation for participation of aggregated DER in the RCM. All of those things are really, really critical and timely and are going to keep us well and truly busy in the year ahead with the reform implementation. And then last but not least, we're seeing with all of this transition, once we've got the transmission in, or ideally at the same time as transmission is getting built, we've got the right market signals, everything is driving this investment and this development. We need to also make sure we've geared up to manage that expected growth in the connections, working again very, very closely with Western Power. But from our side, we need to make sure that we've got the right processes, the right support to ensure that we can accelerate the rate of connections and ensure that the system and power quality and all of those other things that are really important to the integrity of the power system are upheld. And so we are focusing on building a team that really will help developers with an end-to-end process of connections from AEMO's perspective, noting it's already, that you've got to deal with two multiple parties. We don't want you needing to try and find where the front door is into AEMO for the support that's required. And we've already established a registrations monitoring and procurement team headed by Kang Shu to help with that, with some recruitment underway. But really the idea is to provide dedicated focus on preparing for the amount of new connections and the growth in that we're expecting going forward. With all of that, there's also a real importance that we remember that we are only as good as the industry and the decisions and business and growth opportunities that you're all looking for. We're there to support you, so we need to make sure that we are uplifting our stakeholder engagement and improving transparency to make sure we give you guys the information you need to be able to support your business. We're here to facilitate the market and as the market operator, but it's going to be absolutely critical that we, to the extent we can, don't provide information late in the piece for you or give you any surprises, because we understand that you're also managing change in the transition, and the earlier we can give you that timely information and the more transparent we can be with that information, the easier it's going to be for you guys to manage your businesses as well. So real focus, and Martin's even just flagged it in the session before around getting feedback. No point us thinking what good stakeholder engagement is. We really do want to hear from you and get some guidance as to what's of most use and help for you. And then finally on this list is I've mentioned sort of leveraging economies of scale for improved efficiency. And what that really means is we're looking internally at what we can do to be more efficient as a business as well, and how we can to where it makes sense to centralise some of the support services that we as AEMO require, and that should ideally mean more efficiency, because we're not duplicating support teams on the west and the east, but we can actually leverage the fact that we are connected as part of a broader business. That doesn't mean that we don't recognise the importance of an absolute focus on the WEM. There's a lot of things very unique and good about the WEM that we want to preserve. We're not trying to, make that alignment across east and west or anything like that, but we're just wanting to see how we can make it easier for our staff to do work, improve efficiencies where it's possible, and ultimately therefore help keep costs down for the system and for industry. So they're the areas that we're focusing on the year ahead. As I said, it's going to be a big year. I'm looking forward to working with as many of you as possible in these coming months as we reach out and collaborate on those shared challenges for 2025. And unless there's any questions, back to you, Martin.
I think you got off. I don't think you got any questions there, Nicola. So yeah, well done. Okay, so I think that's it of the formal presentation. More than happy to take any other questions if people want to ask, or once again contact us afterwards. But otherwise, for those who are getting break over the festive season, may you have a restful one, and those who aren't, I hope you have a very boring operational time over the festive period as well. But otherwise, I'll see everybody in the new year, and we'll take it from there.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.